You're tall enough.
All right, no,
Did everyone get an agenda?
this is not.
Oh, here's some
This is
more.
main.
A giant agenda?
Oh, yeah, I took all, yeah. Reader's Digest.
There we go. All right, now, much better. Let's call order, South Parks and Pathways Preserve meeting at 4:02. Roll call. Heather?
Present.
Rita? Anna?
Present.
Steve Hurt?
Present.
Steve Kern?
Here.
Patrick?
Here.
Thomas?
Here.
Roy? Present. Liz?
Here.
Chris? Chris City
Coming late.
coming late.
Yep.
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
Also.
Second.
Second. Any additions or changes we want to do to the agenda? Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting the agenda say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes carry. All right, item D, public comment. This is time for members of the public to speak up to 5 minutes on any matter. So there's no one here at in Township Hall meeting. Is there anyone online that would like to speak?
Jonathan Greenberg.
Hey folks, how you doing? Thanks for taking my time, my call? No, thanks for taking my Zoom. I wanted to get back to a topic that came up earlier in the year. There was a discussion about using some of the tree fund to do something or other that got shot down for appropriate reasons. But we don't really have a policy in place, from what I can tell, at least, on how to spend that money. I would love to see those funds spent as close to where they were gathered from. In other words, if we build a new subdivision and get a bunch of money from them, I'd love to see this money being turned back into trees in the nearby area. I think that's the most appropriate use of those funds, since they're trees that are being removed. That actually funds this money, so it should go back to those same purposes. And I also just wanted to ask if there is any plans for a policy to clearly state how those funds are going to be used. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jonathan. Anyone else?
Will anyone be able to answer that question?
Andy, are you aware? Okay.
Yeah, I can share
Thank
that
you.
myself and Jan Culbertson of the Sustainability Committee have been in some conversation regarding the tree fund and creating a procedure. We don't have anything to share publicly at this point, but that is happening. We're hoping to create a procedure so that we can move forward and have something to point to as to why we're moving forward the way that we are.
That's great. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay,
I have a question about the tree fund myself.
sure.
What is it? Not familiar with it.
When developments occur and they take down trees, they are required to put money into a tree fund. So over the last decade or more, there's money been accumulating, probably.
100,000?
I'd say more than 100,000. So
Might be more than two.
So
Intended solely for trees somewhere
in the township,
and no other use for that other than trees. Okay,
I don't know specifically.
I don't know if it's trees or trees and vegetation,
Okay.
but yeah, but that's where the policy is needed. I will say it's over 200,000, like when the IHA went in, they had to take a bunch of trees down, they contributed a lot of money and for taking those down. Other developments have dedicated, had to put into the money. And we haven't spent much at all. And it's either to transplant, I don't know how many trees we planted, but it needs a policy, it needs looking at, how do we best do it? For instance, one possible use of it could be, you know, how the Stabler Road had maybe take a little detour to the left and kind of encroach on some of that backyard there, then possibly a berm and some additional trees could be put there in that space maybe. So that's something, you know, what's the best way to use it? And maybe you put it along Jackson Road, you put it, you know, you gotta be careful where you put them, and Roy can, I'm sure, share this. Generally, rights of way are 66 foot for county roads, and the road commission doesn't like you putting trees in the right of way because it can impact infrastructure underneath by way of sewer, water, cable, electric, gas. It's, and, you know, and create hazards for driving. So.
I think that's the tricky part is, and you know, when the site plan comes before the township, they're required to put plant trees that they can, but obviously they're building homes and building, you know, roads and stuff. So it's not, you know, there's not that much room to put new trees in that envelope anyways. And then, like I said, a lot of the public right of way is road right of way, which isn't room. So then it comes back to reserves in the township. And some of the reserves are wooded areas. So it's sort of like, okay, you know, we need to find a spot. I think, you know, appreciate Ian and them trying to work out a policy to start figuring out a way to, you know, get this money sitting there and let's try to figure out spending, even if it's $10,000 a year, but it seems like something.
But to the extent you have to take a lot of trees down at the entrance of the place so you can make a parking lot, just know that there's potential funds available, so you could replace some of those and put them in places where it would be safe to do so.
So the language of the tree fund itself, is that available on the Scio Township site to look at? Well, I know you're working on something, but for now, until you come up with a plan, is there something people can read about the tree fund on the website?
No, it's, to my knowledge, it's not on the website.
Okay. Is it a public document?
Well, in the budget, it's carried forward. I think it's Fund 408, Anna. I mean,
Just to give Jonathan something
Not
else to refer to in the meantime, while he's waiting for an answer, I guess.
Oh, I've talked to Ann about this many times before. I do appreciate it. I didn't mean
okay.
to sideline your discussion.
No.
I just wanted to make sure it was something that was still being worked on because there are some creative uses that a number of us have been discussing. And if it was, I'd love to offer those offline to Anna and I will follow up. Thank you very much. Sorry to distract you.
Okay, anything else on that?
I had one comment, which I think that looking at well, first a question, whether this is provided for by a city ordinance, I don't know if it is. I'm curious also about what document establishes this tree fund and provides for its governance. And secondly, I think Mr. Green's comment that if the tree fund is generated from taking out trees in one place, then putting new trees near that place is one of the criteria that could be considered.
but that might not be practical if you get $150,000 and where that IHA went in and IHA fills the land
Yeah,
and where, I mean, that could be a factor.
exactly. It's just
Yeah,
a
yeah.
consideration. It could be that you build a parking lot in the middle of the woods and then it's surrounded by woods and there's no place to put trees. That's,
Right.
I don't know.
So, yeah.
The tree code is governed by an ordinance, I believe, that you can find on municipal code online. So this is something I could bring to a future meeting and we could discuss more.
Is it 36?
I'm not sure, I'll have to do a little bit of digging here, but I've read it before and I think we could all read it together.
Okay.
Thanks, yeah.
Item E is approval of minutes. Get the minutes out, I'm trying to read out, yes. Okay. People had a chance to review the minutes.
Yes.
So
Is there a motion to move?
I'll move to approve minutes.
second.
Second. Any changes? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, reports. Start with parks. And you want to update us on, I mean, obviously some exciting news on Van Curler. You want to update us on?
Yeah. a few updates. If you've driven by Scio Ridge Uplands Sidewalk Connector Project, you'll know that it's looking great. There are sidewalks there and it looks like it's been, what's the right word, just restored. It looks like it's kind of been put back together. Yeah, I highly recommend checking it out. That went quickly and relatively smoothly. Van Curler parking lot is moving. The project is continuing to move. We've figured out the permit situation and we are moving on, and it will be gravel. I look forward to doing a visit.
Great.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this last time, but the final paving will happen in the spring. Yeah. We did a field trip out to Van Curler, so folks have seen that there's a couple miles of trail in Van Curler to check out, and I hope to have a nice spread in the next newsletter introducing Van Curler to the residents of Scio, and there'll be some beautiful pictures in there and details on the parking lot and how to access it. And yeah, I'll also just share that field season is coming to an end. So I'll be taking everything we learned working with summer staff and creating procedure for the Parks Department. And I'll probably share that with everyone just for fun once I have that created, so that in the future, when the Parks Department hires summer staff, it's all written up how we do it.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. That everything on parks then?
Mhm.
Planning, that's Chris, LPC, any update?
LPC, just a short update. We, at the last meeting, we talked about the Baker Road land holdings application. The original one we received was 237 acres. Now we have a new one, and that is for, I think, 110 acres. So it's a smaller parcel, and we have, so we've talked about it, we've discussed it some, but that's all. And Dave Lutton, who's the landowner, came in and did a presentation at our October meeting. And the other thing I'll just mention is we did a mailing to prospective landowners of properties that are, valuable for conservation purposes, and got 2 applications resulting from that. So, and then, they go through a process of evaluation and stuff. But so that's my report.
Okay, thank you. Roads, I'm on the roads. We haven't had the November meeting, it's next Wednesday. For some reason, I'm trying to remember why we skipped the first Wednesday and we couldn't do the second Wednesday, which is today because of the election, but obviously we're having this meeting, I don't know. That's what we thought we were told. But we're told you can do it next week. Nothing's changed there. Board of Trustees?
I have a report right here. It's clicking. We didn't have a meeting last night because of the election. We have a meeting a week from Tuesday. At our last meeting on October 24th. October 10th. Andrea Garrett presented her biannual assessor's report, including information related to the upcoming refund of the roads ad funds at $263.37 per parcel in the form of a tax credit. There have been some splits on parcels, and that would impact it. There was a discussion about the environmental and sustainability climate action plan, and the board is going to schedule work sessions to include this SCAP plan within the township's capital improvement plan, our budgeting process, and our strategic planning process. There's going to be a strategic planning meeting that we have scheduled for a Saturday in December. So, if you want to take a break from holiday shopping and come to Township Hall and attend that, you're welcome. There was a presentation about the Wild Fry Farm Historic District, and the board authorized Joyce Parker to enter into a contract for real estate services from Patrick McCauley, who specializes in this type of farm. And this is the farm and the land located at 7970 West Liberty. We approved a request for proposal for next year's audit, which is based on our fiscal year. And the 24th agenda, approved a deficit elimination plan so as to comply with the public act regarding the East Delhi Bridge Maintenance SAD Fund. I already mentioned that. We also took action on Curtis Commercial's application for a drive-through at the old Panera. They've been trying for quite some time to get a new tenant, and the board said that you can have a drive-through there, but it can't be fast food. It's got to be fast casual. And that's sometimes a little close. Fast casual, it takes a little longer to prepare the food. I guess they don't have it ahead of time. It's probably not a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Wendy's or a Taco Bell, but it's more likely a Panera or a Boston Market or something that takes a little bit longer. You order it, you go in there, you order it, you sit down. So it's, you know, that's the limitation of that use with the drive-in. We hired an ordinance officer, someone I worked with in my old job. His name is Sean McCormick. He was a lieutenant at the Pittsfield Township Police Department before retiring, and now I think starts maybe this week, part-time. His name is Sean McCormick. He had really good credentials, good recommendations. We also, Chris Bailey, who was here helping Anna get set up, we approved his proposal for upgrading the township's network infrastructure, cabling, server, installation, the hamsters on the turnstile that powered it all. We're gonna try to update all that stuff. So it was pretty updated through here. So that's that's gonna be used ARPA funds. So that's all I have to report. We don't have the agenda item out for next Tuesday's meeting yet. It hasn't been published. So that's the BOT report.
Any questions?
Could you explain again what's going on at the 7970 West Liberty Farm? I didn't really get.
We're going to try to sell it as a historic farm to somebody.
Oh, that's a Liberty Pond Farm.
Okay, that's,
Wild fry, yeah. I don't know if it's Fray or Fry.
Fry.
Yeah, but
so that's part of the West Liberty Preserve.
Or it's
No.
next to it.
I think
It was at one point part of it. I'm not sure now. Is it part of it? or
It's a
is it
separate, isn't it?
Okay, well,
Five or
it's-
six acre.
It was part of it, but I think
Yeah.
township
it's carved off it's carved off.
It's
and
adjacent to it.
Jason.
That's right. And it's now it's a separate parcel. It's an old home. I think there's a silo, there's some barns, and it's going to be sold in that condition. It's now a historic district, and the county historic district approved it as such. So we're going to be selling it as a historic.
So it's got a historic district designation.
Yes, that's right.
So it has to be preserved somehow, or at
That's
least
right.
go through the historic district
Yeah,
regulations.
that's right. It's got to look the same, and you got to keep it that look. The board, I didn't say, but we approved the removal of dozens, hundreds of tires, big tires, small tires. I don't know, maybe the guy was letting people drop off tires for a few bucks. I don't know, but more tires than we all could use in a lifetime were there. So we had to get rid of them to make it saleable and clean up the environmental thing. But that's, we knew that when we got it. It's not like they were hidden.
Okay, so the city's gonna, I'm sorry, the township will sell it.
I'm sorry, the township is gonna be, yes, that's right. So
And
it's,
is that not something the LPC would want to snap up or?
no,
Well,
I think
it's the house and buildings, and so we
Oh.
usually do the
we've
land.
already done our work on it.
Yeah,
I see.
right.
Gotcha.
We had the Liberty Pond next
Okay,
door.
yeah, gotcha.
And do you know how large that parcel is?
5 or 6 acres, I think.
5 or 6
It's pretty
acres.
small,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think 5 acres, right?
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Is there a buyer that's interested, or are we just getting started on this?
The answer is maybe, but we're gonna sell it through a realtor. So if
Yeah.
the buyer is gonna have to go through
Right.
the gentleman whose name I just mentioned.
Okay.
But we didn't have one in, not that I know of.
I'm glad to hear they're getting rid of the tires. That was an eyesore back there.
Okay. Place Space Committee. Anna, if you wanna?
I guess I'll defer to y'all on the place-based committee. I know Rita's not here today, but anything of note to share?
I have something to share. So I went to the Eddy Center. Rita's been talking about it,
That's fine.
and now I confirm that it exists. And so they have, and I'll just give a brief report on that. So they have what I counted 3 kind of stations on this trail kids could play in. One was little, I guess I call them teepees, built out of sticks, maybe about 4 or 5 feet high, and enough room in there so little couple, 1 or 2 little kids could get in and play inside. And then another station had a number of stumps, maybe 10, 20 stumps in a big circle about as big as all these tables, going from low to the ground, only a few inches high, and then each one getting incrementally higher until there's a great big one that's maybe 3 or 4 feet high off the ground, maybe 3 feet. And then kids can play a game and walk up there and get on the big one. And then there's a number of boulders around that also that you could hop around on. And there's some big sections of log that are like 4 feet in diameter, and they're somehow drilled out like a 2-foot diameter drill. I've never seen a drill bit that big, but they're drilled out, and then you could crawl through it. And then the other station is a stage. It's about maybe 4 by 4 feet, and it's just kind of like a little deck that's just a few inches off the ground. And then there's some benches built out of split logs with legs on them, maybe 5 or 6 benches around it, so kids could kind of do an impromptu performance. And I was out there, and I thought that this stage actually spurred me to, well, it was only my wife and I there, but there was kind of a big feather. You could do there's a gymnastics where you do this twirl, not a feather, but kind of a ribbon, and you twirl the ribbon around, and just having that there got me to perform a little bit. I think kids would do that. So I thought it was interesting for me to see, because I've seen things like this, but I haven't really thought about them so much. And I think that it would be good to have something like that in one or more of our parks. And I think it's not expensive. Building a teepee out of sticks, that a couple Boy Scouts could do that in an hour.
Yeah, I also went out to Eddie, and then I also talked to City of Ann Arbor. They just did one of these at Almendinger Park. So I tried to send the group some pictures, but I'm not sure everyone got it, just because whenever I decide to send stuff to the P3C committee, it kicks like most of them back, so I don't know if anyone got it. But anyways, the City of Ann Arbor, Almendinger Park, they hired a company called Michigan Recreation, I think. Anyways, most playgrounds that you see, the plastic and steel playgrounds, they build those all over the state, but they've also started doing natural playgrounds. So this is the first one in the city, and it's at Almendinger Park. They took some larger trees and logs and sort of like did this, crisscrossed them, so you can climb on that. Took some logs like they did at Eddie, so you can walk up it. And I'm trying to think of what other features. And actually, there's an article in MLive. So if you can't get the email I sent you, I tried to send you, you can look it up on MLive. MLive did a little story on it. Natural play space, Almendinger Park, City of Ann Arbor, one of those, you should hit it. So hiring them, it will cost a little bit of money. I think the good news is, though, it might provide cover for the township board, because they have people that sort of design it. The other hand is, if you do it low scale, and it's low off the ground, might not be any liability. But as you start building things up, if I'm the township board, there might be some concerns, like, what happens if a kid jumps off the log that's 3 feet high and hurts himself? I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think probably most of us did that as a kid, jumping and climbing on things. That's just, but when it becomes a township park or facility, that's where it becomes a little sketchier. And I think, the natural play spaces gives it more flexibility. And I did talk to the women out at Eddie, they use someone to sort of oversee this, with their design and when they built it. Because a lot of it, you just say, oh, this group right here, we can build the thing. With a couple of chainsaws and, a few hammers, you could probably do it, but obviously, it's like, okay, what is potential liability for the township? So I think, if you get a chance to get out to Eddie, get a chance to get the Almendinger, or at least look at that thing on live posted.
What was it? Who was the name of the company who built it?
Michigan, it's in my email, but Michigan Recreation, something. MRC,
I'll forward that email.
Michigan Recreation.
Good, yeah,
If you do it.
yeah, Anna's works.
I'll chat with Chris on it. We'll fix it.
Yeah, so I think, as we continue, suppose there's a place in Toledo has one and one in Jackson. I think Rita tells us about the one in Jackson. When I talked to the woman in Eddie, she said that also Toledo, either Metro Parks or some other has a nice one too. So I think, the more information we can gather.
Yeah.
So, okay, what are they doing, how they're doing it, how much is it gonna cost? We sort of gather all that information. And so I would agree, I think they're pretty neat. They're obviously a lot cheaper than the plastic and steel ones. But, but I think it's worth looking into. I think that covers all our reports unless anyone else, anything else, a report.
I'll add one last item on the play spaces. The play space committee met. I don't think we've discussed that meeting in this group yet.
No, we haven't actually.
Just the one item I would share from that, the takeaway I thought was we kind of created an order of operations, which was this type of crowdsourcing research, visiting the properties and everything, and then compiling that research and providing it to the Board of Trustees, just letting people know this is a conversation we're having in parks. What are some questions you might have? And then doing research on those questions so that when it does come time to come to the Board of Trustees, all of the questions about liability and maintenance are answered.
So I just have a couple things. I did look, and it is chapter 36 of our code of ordinances. So you go to our website, under ordinances, you click on it, and at the very bottom, that's zoning, that's chapter 36. And in chapter 36, there's tree fund, and it's section 36-346. I'm gonna give this to you, Liz, for easy inclusion into the minutes if you want to. But it says that the township board, who doesn't, Heather? Okay, I'll give it to you and give it to Heather. Sorry, I didn't. The township board shall administer and use the tree fund for the purpose of planting and maintaining trees and woodland resources within the township. So that's what it says. And the only other thing from a planning perspective, planning commission perspective, as it relates to pass, there is a request for a PUD, planned unit development at the general location of Zeeb Road and Jackson Road there, kind of behind the CVS, behind the Wendy's, over there, and there's various, it's, some of it is industrial, some of it is office, and they want to have put a new it's called the new Honey Creek Business Park. And when you have to do a PUD, there needs to be a discussion about what the public benefits are going to be for the township. And one of the things we're looking at is solar panels and EV charging stations and preserving wetlands and woodlands, potential donation to the fire department for upgrades. But as it relates to this group's work, donation to Scio Township for improving pedestrian circulation and sidewalks in the vicinity of the project. So that's kind of a pathway related thing. Stay tuned. Nothing's been finalized. It hasn't even been talked about at the Planning Commission, but they're talking about either pathways or contribution towards pathways in that section. And I'm sorry, Heather, that I referred to Liz, not you. Here it is.
And actually, since Chris, you just got here, did you have anything else to add from planning?
That was it right there. I was just thinking about it, so.
John's still.
Yes, that was there, so. And we kind of left it that, as a PUD, you're going to need public benefit. So come back with a lot of public benefit before we're gonna probably give it our blessings, so.
So is it
Maybe we scared him away.
Malloy?
I'm sorry?
Used to be Malloy.
Yeah, right, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Paper, I mean,
It's, I know it's Eric Brower now that's coming forward.
Right, but yeah, I think it
But
used to be Malloy.
It's in the really, really early stages. It hasn't even been discussed at the Planning Commission publicly yet.
Is that something though, in general, I heard what you just said, it's wide open kind of, but do you generally try for a PUD to keep the public benefit very close to that specific area that's being worked on? Or could it, if we determined that, for example, building a parking lot in the woods, there's no reason to put trees around the parking lot because you just built a parking lot in the middle of the woods. So if the pathways aren't really as deemed as useful right at that PUD, could we take those resources and put them toward not, you know, I don't know, add an extra bit of the zebra pathway, I'm just picking examples, not that, is that a possibility to move that thing around?
I mean, typically, we're looking at, like I think Mr. Reiser just said, we're looking at public benefits that this provides.
Right.
So we do want solar power, we want EV or electrification or open space, and, you know, I'm not real familiar with a contribution for fire equipment or something, if you could, you know, that, so that's getting.
And it's, I'll be honest, I'm too new to know what we usually do.
Okay.
Because I don't know that there's the guidance that there should be or a policy that it should be. Because the planning commission could have one direction that they think a public benefit could take, but then ultimately it's up to the board of trustees to direct the lawyer to develop a development agreement that incorporates public benefits that the board is going to a majority pass. So, you know, Chang and his buddies on the planning commission could have one thing in mind, but the board of trustees says, no, this doesn't align with what we feel is important for by way of public benefit. So ultimately, it's up to the board of trustees to direct the attorney to incorporate the public benefits that the board wants to see implemented.
Well, thank you both. Nothing else in reports. LPC report, is Barry gonna join us?
Yes, Barry Lonick is here on Zoom.
Oh.
Hi, Barry.
Greetings.
Greetings. I have a map pulled up if that'd be helpful for any of our conversation.
Sure. And I've got some documents that I can share also.
Oh,
if people
great.
want to see them. But show me what you got.
Oh, I just had MapWash not pulled up, but I'm sure your documents are not better. So just let me know if you want that pulled up at any point.
Okay, so a bit of background. In May, I actually just looked up the exact date here. May 18th of 2015, Scio Township completed a conservation easement purchase on most of the property that's owned by Mike Levine and Erica Kempter. It's on the north side of Marshall Road between Zeeb and Baker. The very north part of that property, the northeast corner of that, is adjacent to the piece of woods that we bought from Mercero years ago, and that is part of the Marshall Preserve.
D.D. Marshall.
Yep, not the Marshall Park, but the Marshall Preserve. And in that negotiation, again, 8.5 years ago, anticipating that we might someday acquire property interests to the east and to the north, we wrote into the easement that we have a 20-foot wide access easement across the northeast corner of the Levine and Kempter property. And got that surveyed in. And the other, so there was two stipulations to that. One is that we had to have access from both the east and the north, and that had to occur within 10 years. So we now have access from the east by virtue of that chunk of woods. And we're, as was mentioned a moment ago, working on the property to the north of that, which we hope we'll be able to just acquire the woods of sometime in the next couple of years. But we're 8.5 years into that 10-year period at this point. And it's certainly conceivable that we won't be able to close on anything involving that woods to the north in the next 1.5 years. That's one issue. And the second one is, excuse me, the location of a trail that might be put in that area. So one of the things that I do with conservation easements on properties in Scio Township is that I meet with the landowners once a year and walk around the property and confirm that there aren't any subdivisions, gravel pits, clear cuts, wetland fills, and so forth that would be in violation of the conservation easement. And I did that just recently, I think it was last week actually, with Mike. And he brought this issue up, as he has in the past, but I started thinking, whoa, we're 8.5 years into that 10. maybe we should either extend that agreement or renegotiate it before it expires. And so I brought that to Anna's attention, and that's why she suggested that I meet with you folks today to discuss this matter. I can show you the survey if you'd like to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Survey on an aerial photograph. So I'm going to ask to share screen. Anna, if you can allow me to do that.
I think I've done that. Did that work?
There we go. So I'm going to do this one. So everybody see that now?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's the survey itself. And you can see that it's a 20-foot wide easement. We drew it so that it would touch both the chunk of woods that we bought from Mercero on the north, and also the property to the south of that, which was at that time also available. It was owned by a bank through a foreclosure. And so we thought either way, if we acquire those interests, we'd be able to access this property. Turned out to be the one to the north. The one to the south, Mike's parents actually bought out of the or from the bank, and they've built their retirement house on the property, and Mike and Erica are actually farming some of that. But it's a 20-foot wide easement. It runs 250 some feet to the north, all the way to the corner of their property. And then I'd like to show you the other one, which is this one, I think. Nope, not that one, sorry.
I think it'd be helpful if you could provide just kind of some context with the aerial footage, because I know in this room, people are familiar with D.D. Marshall, but not so much the Kempter Levine parcel.
Yes, let me go to the map Washington for that. And share that with you. Okay, everybody can see that now?
Yes.
Yes.
The map Washington website. And you can see my cursor as well.
Yes.
So these are the two pieces that we bought from Virginia Loveland, whose husband was Doug Marshall, who passed away in an automobile incident. And so we're naming the preserve in his honor. So those are the two pieces that we just bought within the last couple of years. And then there's the chunk of the Mercero property that we bought some years ago. And then this is the Levine and Kempter property. It's basically an 80-acre parcel. They excluded some area in the southwest corner of it from the conservation easement. So the easement has this bit of frontage on Marshall Road, and then goes back and includes all of this woods here and this woods here. None of that is publicly accessible. It's only that piece right here in the northeast corner, sorry, over which we have this access easement. And then to the north of their property is this chunk of woods that's owned by the Baker Road Land Holdings LLC. That extends all the way over to Baker Road. And actually they have about a 20-acre piece over on the west side of Baker. That piece right there that we didn't buy when we bought the two pieces of the Sloan Preserve long ago, because there was some arsenic contamination issues on that 20 or so acres. So we left that out at the time. But in the short term, we're looking to acquire this chunk of woods and also some other land. But that's the context there.
Barry, if I can just spell out one more piece of that context. It's probably clear, but we focus a lot on connectivity. So the idea being you could connect D.D. Marshall potentially all the way to Baker Road, potentially to then be at Sloan Preserve. So this is kind of in the pros plan and in the grand plan of parks, there is kind of this steering towards connectivity And that's why I asked Barry to speak with us today, because if we're gonna be talking about this easement and a potential path that could exist potentially between properties, I think the PPP committee should be in the conversation. Thanks, Barry.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask
As well as into that neighborhood behind the strip mall there, I think they call it Dexter Crossing. There'd be an opportunity to link, with these little spurs in here as well. So a link into the city, a link over to the preserve, all that is possible. But it all hinges on this little 20-foot wide access easement in the northeast corner of their property, which is due to expire in a year and a half.
I think Liz had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Barry, are there alternative possibilities for access to DD Marshall that you can talk about?
Not at this time.
Okay, all right.
It's something that is on my mind. And there's one, I think, pretty good opportunity down the road. And that landowner was part of the mailing that Liz mentioned earlier that we did. And we did get a couple of responses so far, that mailing that went out to, I think, about 75 landowners, if I remember correctly. But there are properties that are high priority for the township for a variety of reasons. Recreation is one. And oftentimes what I do is track down phone numbers, or sometimes even knock on doors of people and say, hey, did you get that letter? And are you interested? Can we talk? So I will follow up with the letter having gone out in the near future and see if that one property in particular might be available. The other possibility that I'll mention, as long as we're on this site here, it's a longer term prospect, but we hold the conservation easement on this property right here, which is owned by Sandy and Dennis Hayes. And we do have an option to purchase that property in the future as well, if they ever choose to sell it. And they're not going to do that for some time, but that's another piece there that could be added to the preserve and to the overall conserved land in that area. It doesn't quite get us the access that we want, but that's a longer term prospect.
Thanks, Barry.
In the short term, if we want to maintain the opportunity to make any sort of connection from Marshall Road to Baker Road or to the city of Dexter, it all hinges on this little corner of that property there. And this is probably good enough, as you can see that there's a seasonal stream that cuts through there, and our access easement starts down here. And one of Mike's concerns is that if we tried to put a trail access across the southern part of this property and then go north along that line, we'd have to cross the stream, and there's some low areas in there on his property. And that's not the ideal situation from their perspective. And so I think that they'd like to see some future access. And I know this is a long-term prospect for you guys because there's lots of other things on your plate. We just don't want to lose this opportunity because this thing is due to expire in a year and a half. So if we can indicate that the access is going to be the north part up here, so we're not crossing the stream in the low areas around there, I think that would be much more to their liking. And in fact, as little of the property of their property that can be crossed in order to get from our property on the east to this other property on the north, I think would be most appealing to them. Having a 250-foot trail running from that point all the way to their corner there is not appealing to them. So I think it's possible that if we could define the location of this potential connection in this area up here, closer to the northeast corner, that they would be potentially willing to either extend the agreement or modify the agreement So it may be still 20 foot wide, but it's only 100 foot long or something like that, rather than 250 foot long.
Okay.
So Barry, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
What is our interest that we currently own and how long does it last? Do we have fee or an easement or is it a lease or what do we have and where is it and for how long is it?
So we own the fee interest. If you can all see where my cursor is, where that just lit up there.
That's our land.
We own the fee interest on that piece.
Okay.
We have the 20-foot access easement along this boundary for the entire length of the piece that we own. And
In perpetuity?
no, that's the 10 years.
Okay.
Year and a
That's
half
the 10
left.
years. And we're 8.5 years into it.
So we own land for 10 years we never used? A little bit?
So we own the property to the east where the cursor is now.
No, but we had an easement for 10 years that we weren't able to avail ourselves of?
Because we had to have, in addition to only lasting for 10 years,
Okay.
we had to have access from the east and from the north.
Okay.
And at the time we did this 8.5 years ago, we had neither.
Okay.
We now have access from the east, but not yet from the north. And, will we get that access, to the north over here within the next 18 months? Maybe, but maybe not. Even if the plans for annexation and all that stuff go through, will that sale and that transfer go through in the next 18 months? I think there's a good chance that it won't. And so if Mike wanted to be a hardliner, he could say, well, your 10 years is up and you don't have access to the north. And so sayonara.
Are you saying, Barry, that it might be helpful if this group took some action to say, we'll build whatever pathway on the north section only and forego the rest of the southern section of the easement then? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, I hear you.
Yes. And I think in doing that, and I mean, the ideal situation is that you'd figure all this stuff out and say, this is where the trail is going to go. It's going to go right there.
Yeah.
And you only have to cut across this little corner of the property there. And I know this is with all those other stuff you got going on, it may not be a high enough priority for you. But if we could somehow indicate that to Mike and Erica, I think that they might be able to say, okay, we're willing to extend the easement either in perpetuity, on a narrower piece of it, rather than the entire, length of it. And then we wouldn't have to worry about this going forward.
It seems that an easement without perpetuity in this situation is not terribly useful. It seems that we should have perpetuity to develop this connection.
Yeah, that's the ideal situation, certainly. But in the negotiation, I mean, they were not crazy about having any access across their property, and so that was the negotiation. Okay, fine, we'll give you 20 foot, and it's for 10 years.
What's the downside to just going ahead and saying, okay, we won't make it the entire 250 feet of access, it's 20 feet wide, but to just take that corner and just say, yes, we'll take it, that's what we will do, so that we can get the perpetuity, and then we figure it out later how we actually use it. Is there any harm in that? What's the downside of just doing that? Instead of waiting a year and 5 months to do it?
I don't think there is any.
Barry, if we own the southeast parcel and you're negotiating with the southwest parcel and the northwest parcel is part of the Baker LLC/Glutton proposal, what is the northeast parcel of that quadrant there?
This one here.
Well, you just lost my Utah lines.
You go.
Who owns that one there? Yes.
Well, I can click on it and tell you, but there's a private road that runs south.
Didn't answer that. Just ask who owned it.
Dexter and Arbor Road. It's called Forshee Lane, and it's owned by those folks.
So if the guy in the bottom left didn't want to give us it, then we could talk to the bottom, top right and say, hey, let's just hop, skip over. It's like a hop, game of Foursquare where you draw the squares and you step over it diagonally right now, or we got to get access either from the bottom left or the top right. Not
That's
much.
correct. We don't currently have that, obviously, and if they're an unfriendly landowner and don't want any access across their property.
I understand that, but that's your job to approach these people and say, we just need a 10 or 20-foot swath in the extreme edge of that corner. I don't know if there's a lead pipe down there or a survey, or if there's a demarcate. There must be, somebody must know where that is.
There's definitely an iron in that corner right there, because we have surveys on both the woods that we bought and the easement property.
And right now we'd have to step over that iron, but not onto the right or left.
Well, I mean, this, to the north is private property that we have no
Right,
access to.
but to the northwest, if we acquire that. If we
Yes.
acquire the northwest.
Yes,
All right.
yeah, but ideally you have either to the northeast or to the southwest.
Right.
You have some dedicated easement, so you don't have to make the leap over the corner. Yes.
Thanks.
Earlier this summer, after we had the discussion about Dee Dee Marshall and the driveway in the parking lot, we met with Mike, Rita, Ann and I, and we walked back to that corner and where that property iron was. And he talked about, the 200 feet. And I think, if it's really, we're gonna have hiking and walking paths, we really don't need 250 feet. We need, it's 20 feet wide, you could put 20 feet long or something, obviously a walking path is pretty small. Maybe it's 30, 40 feet. So I think, to me, it does make sense to try to negotiate. The tricky part is, if Mike, like you said, wants to be hardline, he knows in a year and a half, good chance nothing's gonna happen on that northwest quadrant, because we've been trying to work something out for, I don't know how many, a long time.
Oh, just a couple of decades, man.
Yeah, so I think if we could, figure out what we think the number should be, 20 feet by 30 feet, and propose that to him. And even if we have to pay him some, simply be a win for the township. And then when and if we ever do acquire that northwest corner up there, go out to Baker, at least we'll have it in our back pocket. If that never materializes, so we got this little piece of,
But
30.
isn't this little easement the tail wagging the dog being the top left parcel of the giant, you know what I mean? Like, if we don't get Baker Landings because we're not interested, or it doesn't become available or whatever, then we'll have an easement to nowhere.
That's right.
Yeah, but so it's a small little easement,
Right.
but having the easement coming all the way down 200 feet.
Yeah, we don't need it.
Yeah.
If we need an easement, TBD, based on what's gonna
Yeah,
happen there.
I don't
then we
know.
don't need much of one.
Right.
Okay.
It's not a huge value, but there is some value, I think, to the township into the future.
Yeah.
It's hard to determine because there's a lot of moving parts.
Right.
And none of us in this room really
Even if
know.
we don't get the top left, then maybe we can get an easement anyways.
Mhm.
Right.
Sometime in the future, I guess, sometime in the future, I think something's gonna happen to that northwest corner. What it is, I don't think anyone that's in this room is gonna know, but yeah, if we could,
But having a door you could potentially walk through instead of a brick wall there.
Right.
You've got that possibility.
Right.
Let's get it.
right.
And giving up 200 feet of that 250 or something like that
We don't need
in
that.
exchange, maybe in exchange for easement.
Yeah.
I don't know what the exact wording is, easement that is forever. It contingent amount of having someplace to go on the easement, of course,
Right.
seems like a good play.
Right. One thing we could do as a committee is sort of have Anna work with Barry and talk to Mike and see what our option, what do we think we could negotiate with him to, shorten up the easement.
Right.
And what is it 30 feet, is it 40 feet, is it 50 feet, 20 feet, but how long do we really think we need?
It'll keep the cost down and it'll keep the encroachment into his property
Right.
And ask for in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Yes.
That will, that's a good idea.
So, go ahead, Ann.
Oh, I was just gonna share, maybe the one downside being that the current easement does have road access. Is that correct, Barry?
That's not a road, I don't think.
It doesn't look like it.
No.
No, the current easement that goes to the south does hit Marshall Road.
It does?
I thought it just went to the corner of the.
Is that true?
Not an easement, but we do own all the way down to Marshall Road.
Oh, no, I meant,
Oh,
the easement that we currently have.
The
did you
10-year
drag-
easement.
Yeah, did you drag your cursor down past that barn towards the road?
oh,
It's north of there.
There's no road that
Isn't there
borders
like,
that, or is there?
the current easement that we have, that will expire, could you trace it with your cursor? Did it go down? Roy, do you remember when we were meeting with them and?
Well, I think what Mike explained is there's that easement up there that Barry's pointing to, which is, I guess, is, 200 feet by 20 feet is the number, I guess, we're being shown. But also down by the barn,
Yeah,
Barry, suppose there's another easement that we acquired that,
just to confuse matters for you. So
Yeah.
back to this one for a moment. The access easement across the Levine and Kempter property goes 20 foot south of that point right there. Into this, along this property. So it goes from there over and then 20 foot, 250 foot north.
okay.
So that one does not have road access then?
No.
right?
is
Okay.
that connected to the easement down by the barn that does have access to Marshall Road?
So when we bought this piece from Mercero, it included this pole barn on the property. And we recognize it's not something that we wanted to have. This is before all you guys were up and active at this point. We just said, we don't want to have a pole barn. It's an attractive nuisance. And we either have to take it down or we sell it to one of the adjacent landowners. And Mike and Erica, running a farm operation with very little covered space for equipment and seed sort. They run a nature and nurture seed company where I get all of my vegetable seeds these days. They're terrific, but they needed places to do those kinds of activities undercover. And so they said, we'd like to buy that. And so we sold them, if you took this line and went south to there and then cut over down to the road there, basically that 8 acres of land that included the pole barn, subject to a conservation easement, so it cannot be developed other than for agricultural buildings. But we also, as part of that, negotiated another access easement that runs along the edge of this property up to, this is before we bought the pieces from Loveland. So we have an access easement from Marshall Road. And again, it's like 20 foot wide, I think. It runs all the way up to there.
Is that in perpetuity?
Yes, that one is.
And
That one is.
does that include the right to put in a trailhead at the south end or a parking lot at the
A
south?
trailhead, yes, but not a parking lot.
It's a sight line, right? Is it?
No, because they didn't think to add it.
No, it's a sightline issue. I mean, that was part of the reason why we were able to get this property from Mercero for fairly cheap, because this curve in the road there and all those darn trees getting in the
Other
way.
trees in front, okay. Doesn't look like it.
In order for him to get a driveway permit on this part of the property here, he would have had to cut a whole bunch of trees on neighboring properties. And the owner said, of those other properties, Loveland being one of them, and then the person who bought this property and built houses said, no bloody way, we're gonna let you to cut down all those trees so you can have the sight lines to put in a driveway and develop your property. And so we were able to purchase the property relatively inexpensively because of his inability to get the sight lines to put in a driveway for development. So trailhead, yes, but no parking area.
So, talking about this easement that runs behind the pole barn, is the land on which that easement sits, is that a path or a single track road, or what is it, just trees?
It's basically brush at this point. It's never been developed for any use. It's just on the survey. that if we wanted to develop that at some point for pedestrian access.
It was like a scrub brush tree line.
And a wire fence that runs through there.
Correct. And you know, Mike's made it known that he's not crazy about that easement because it's really, I mean, the distance between the pole barn and the property boundary there is like 50 feet. It's really tight. And so if we have a 20-foot wide easement across there, you know, and we put a trail in there, it's right up against the structure. And he'd rather not have the public, you know, walking by there, which is part of the reason why we bought the property next door. Well, then we found out that it's not enough sight lines and road frontage there either, to put in a parking lot and a trailhead. So
Barry, I mean, now that we have access to Marshall Road and that long parcel, from, I don't know, who's that, from Mercer? I forget who, too many people. But now that we own that bigger parcel, what, does that 20-foot easement even have value to the township? I mean, obviously there's some value. I guess, is there really need for us to continue to own that 20-foot? Because we already have, you know, I don't, it's a lot wider that we own all that land next to it. Because I think that could be a bargaining chip if we want to, you know, do some horse trading. Just for your information, that barn is in pretty rough shape, so I don't think we gave him much, because I was in there, so like, I'm not sure how long I want to stand in this thing, to tell you the truth.
yeah, it needs work, for sure.
It needs a lot of work, yeah. I wouldn't store too much equipment in there because you may fall down on it. But so the easement, the 20-foot easement, now that we own the land to the east, is it sort of almost excess land that we could use as a negotiating chip to secure that easement up there in that corner?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Great insight there.
Unless it's really smooth and there's a path already and you don't have to.
No, it's just, it's brush and trees, there's a barbed wire fence. I mean, when we walk, it's sort of like, I mean, we own it, yeah, it's something, there's value to it, but not, I mean, I don't know why we'd ever put an easement, and then we put a walking path, then you put a walking path right next to this barn that is in pretty rough shape. Why wouldn't you put the walking path in the woods or in the land of, you know, the wide area that we own, and keep people away from attractive nuisance, which is what the barn is right now?
So is it also true then that 20 feet to the east in the property we own, that's not full of trees, that's just brush also? So in other words, we wouldn't be cutting down a bunch of trees to use our land to do that?
You could easily put a winding path through DD Marshall and avoid all the trees.
Yep.
I think it's a problem.
Yes,
That's the
right.
issue.
Mhm.
That easement, to me, would only make sense if that was the only way to get line of sight to then have that parking lot. But it just doesn't seem like a reality without taking out all of those larger trees. So yeah, Roy, that was a good
It is.
catch.
So it seems like maybe that's something we should have Anna and Barry look at and meet with John and, you know, see if there's, you know, what's the township's long-term plan for these parcels? And what makes sense, and maybe have them bring something back next meeting or in 2 meetings, whatever it's gonna take. Obviously we got 18 months, but we don't want to do it on month 17.
Right.
I don't know if we need a resolution, but maybe that's something, I mean, what do you think?
Yeah,
Does
I
that make
think,
sense for you, Anna?
yeah, Barry and I can continue the conversation and then I'll report back.
Does that make sense as a committee?
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're doing that.
definitely. So just to be clear then, Barry, in that top left little first easement we were talking about, you're talking about horse trading this for that, because it's the same people, right?
Right.
It's not different people. As you said, there's so many people. I want to make sure that we're still talking about the same. Okay, so that could be, so we have possibly, just as Barry said earlier, if we just shorten that 250 feet to, I'm just gonna say 50 feet, whatever, that's palatable for them. We may or may not have to throw in the extra 20 feet you're talking about to have it be a perpetuity deal. Am I right so far? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, obviously they need to talk to Mike
Understood,
and-
but I just wanna make sure I'm lined it up in my head right, that we have those two chips, we'll call them, to maybe get the perpetuity. Okay, I got you now.
And Barry probably needs to look into whether or not we're able to abandon or vacate an easement that we use millage funds or conservation funds for? What the legalities of that are?
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not gonna say anything more on this public record about that, other than Barry should look into that.
And actually, we did do that. So this parcel here is owned by Mike's parents. And that was the one that was, it was the developer punched a road in and a little cul-de-sac at the end up here. And then went bankrupt. And it went to the University Bank for a while, and then eventually they bought it. But there was still an easement across that property to get to the piece that Mercereau owned. And part of our agreement was to abandon that easement some time ago. So we actually have done that in the past, and that was for a vehicular easement as opposed to just a pedestrian access easement, which it is over here. So I think the answer to that is yes, but of course we'll get council's opinion on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Barry.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining us, Barry.
My pleasure. Thanks for your interest.
Anything else on our agenda? Now we'll go to public comment number 2, item H. Obviously, there's still no one here from in the township hall for public comment, but is there anyone on Zoom who has their hand raised?
No, I do not see anyone with their hand raised.
Anyone else have anything? Yeah, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And I'll support that.
Support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
All right.
Right.